So, hello everyone. It's a true pleasure being here today. My name is Marina Santos Haugen, and I'm going to talk about a polymorphic mindset. So, first, a little bit about me. So, I am a full stack software engineer, a consultant from Kodemaker, and I have a background from industrial economics and technology management, where I focused on computer science and AI. And I also went to NTNU School of Entrepreneurship. And before I became a consultant, I worked 7 years in DNB, where I worked from everything from innovation, A/B tests, to a software engineer in the open banking, working with DNB's API platform and the online bank. So as you see, I haven't had like an atypical career because I actually went from business development and then became an experiment manager, and then later I reskilled into a software engineer. So you can say that I'm very polymorphic. I like a little bit of everything. And over the past year and a half, I've been working across 3 different projects, diving deep into agentic AI and workflows. And what I see is that a very little team can get so much more done because this technology, it's moving so fast and it has so much power that they usually say that AI won't replace humans, it will give them superpowers. And this is the promise, and then this is the reality. Spotted in the wild, the agentic developer. So this is me, a habitat, a romantic trip to France, observed babysitting her agents, and with the laptop never fully closed. So I feel very sorry for my husband on this romantic trip, but I can't help it. I get very excited about this because AI gives us the ability to shift shape when the context demands it. So I call this polymorphic mindset because polymorphic comes from the word polymorphism, which means many forms. And it basically is that one thing can appear in many ways. And this word is often used in biology to describe variants of the same species, and also, as we know, in programming. So we have one animal contract, but then the dog and the wolf is implemented differently. So we have the same interface, but different behavior. And I'm maybe more polymorphic than most because one day I am a developer in the flow state with 3 screens, and the next day I am at a masquerade ball in Versailles. So you can think of it like a game or a game character. I'm the same person, but then I can switch with different abilities by taking on a cape or a hat or something. Yeah. And usually in product development, we have these 3 roles. We have the product manager, the developer, and then the designer. So, and usually, if we look into the roles, the product manager sets direction, prioritizes the backlog, makes sure that all the stakeholders are aligned, and also that we're building something with impact. And then we have the developer who builds securely, tests, and refactors. And then this designer who thinks about UI and user experience and also gathers insight with quantitative data, maps out the user journey, and captures the user voice. So, and I have had responsibility across these roles. And now I'm going to show you during this presentation how we as developer now can kind of put on different hats and do more than what we have traditionally done. And I think cross-functional collaboration is key to success. So I'm not saying this is an argument for less cross-functional collaboration. It's just that this agentic AI makes teamwork less sequential and less role-based and more collective. So value shifts from executing tasks to shaping systems. And this is a quote from McKinsey's report, 1 year of agentic AI, where they say AI is not, it's not about the agent, it's about the workflow. And here, this study from BCG says that over 85%, they are still stuck in this task info assistance delegation step. And that's like before you have this workflow reinvention where you get really the organizational value. And then we also see here from this report that over 40% of agentic projects, they fail. And this is not due to the technology, it's due to the process. And then here we also see that 76% of leaders, they actually see now agentic AI as coworker and not a tool. So there's like huge shifts going on here. And if we look into some more findings, this report from P&G says that they found that AI actually broke down the silos between different teams, and that the AI-equipped cross-functional teams, they produced 3 times more breakthrough than the others, and also that the AI removed the functional barriers between the R&D and the commercial because they could suddenly talk the same language in a way. And but this is not given because another report says that individual AI does not equal team value, and that here we see that 93% of AI budget goes to the technology, but only around 7% goes to actually the people. So, and without deliberate workflow design, individual AI use can actually erode team work or how a team works. And I've actually experienced this in my last project because suddenly, like, we were talking and discussing less together because you were sparring with an AI. So suddenly we didn't discuss things in our team. So we need to be very, very aware that this technology is actually changing how we work. And then finally, that transformation requires redesign. So organizations that redesign workflow not just deploys new tools, they actually achieve transformation in a way. And another thing that we need to transform is actually our definition of an engineer and definition of coding. So we need to remember that AI, it's just a tool, and you are responsible for the output and you own the code that is generated. So when something fails, it's easy to blame, like, oh, the AI did that so wrong. But I would argue that that's your responsibility, and that if it produces something shitty, then it's actually your fault because maybe you haven't guided it or had a good workflow. And now with the AI, it's very easy, as we said, to feel like you have superpowers. It's so easy to generate a lot of code, and it's just like click, and then woo, you are done. But I would say that is the seduction. That you think like, oh, look how much code I produced or how much progress I've made. But then the code is very shitty. So it's very important to remember or make sure to focus where we as humans can give the most value. So now it's not about like the syntax in every line of code anymore. Like one bad line of code equals one bad line of code. But then one bad line of plan equals 10 to 100 lines of bad code. And then one bad line of research equals over 1,000 lines of bad code. And then one bad line of specification. Then you have kind of like understood the wrong, you have the wrong problem. This is about you misunderstanding the system. And here you have like 10,000s of bad line of code. And then in the bottom, we have the core infrastructure. That is like if you have one bad line of instruction in the Claude MD, which is loaded on every session, then you have like hundreds of thousands of bad line of code. And this actually happened to me recently in a project where I was quite new to the project and I had misunderstood the system. So I had bad research. And then suddenly I was stuck in this implementation trap. I would say I got like 2 huge PRs, one for backend and front end, was 8,000 lines of code. And I was stuck here in like a refactoring game. And this is a very expensive way to find out that you've done something wrong because you have so much code and it's very hard to see and find out what you have done wrong, right? So it's very important to think more about the workflow now as the product. So every time you get a task, you can think of it as just a test that your workflow works and that it's good. And I have called this like autonomy of a workflow. So I usually follow this process where I go through like an exploration phase, a planning phase, code and verify. And this is not a linear loop. I can jump a little bit back here and now, but this then builds on some blocks that power it. So we have the configuration, which is like my personal adjustments for my optimal flow. And my optimal flow might be different from your optimal flow, right? Because we have different needs. And then we have the skills and the plugins. And I think most of you maybe are familiar with skills, but basically that's just a recipe for a task written in a markdown file. And a plugin just bundles the skills, so it's easy to kind of share and install. And it can bundle hooks and MCPs in the plugin. But these, then you have kind of the ready-made skills that comes with Claude or wherever, or from marketplaces, or the ones you make yourself. And then the MCP, which stands for Model Context Protocol, that is just a USB-C port for all the AI applications, so that your agents can talk to your external tools that you use. So now we will go through each of these parts, and I will show you examples of how I work. So if we jump into configuration first, so the first thing I do is to kind of like avoid death by prompt deny or allow deny prompts. So do housekeeping on your permissions. You can check them with /permissions. Or you can also do as me to have auto mode on, so I don't need to accept everything all the time. And then I like to have something called insight boxes, which is the ones you see here with a star. And these kind of like tells me the patterns and the reasoning for choices that the agent does. And it's very practical if you're new to a code base and you need to quickly get into things. And that you can enable by /config, and then you go to output style and then explanatory. And then keep Claude MD, the core infrastructure, up to date at every time. So here there's a plugin called Claude MD Management. And within that one, there's a skill called Claude MD Improver. So if you trigger that one, you will kind of get like a score grading on your Claude MD file, and it will suggest things that you can improve. And there's also another command actually within this plugin called Revise Claude MD. So when you're sitting in a session and you learn something new or it does something wrong, you can trigger this and it will actually catch the learning from that specific session. And then finally, just managing context so that you have good quality of code. Because if you code and you have very little context left, then the output of the code gets worse. So I use often like compact and clear to make sure that I have a good window. And also you can configure a status line as you want, but I have the working direction, my directory visible, and also a context warning telling me how much I have left. Okay, so if we move over to MCP servers, so these are some examples of the MCP servers that I use. So within design, it often depends about what client or organization, the tools that your designers use, but you can have a plug into Figma to create and get design, to Miro to draw and read whiteboards and do ideation. And I will talk about 21st Dev later. Then in issue tracking, I connect with Linear and Jira and GitHub issues. And it's super nice to create when I find bugs and automate how it creates the issues. And they can attach pictures and a lot of details. So I think it's very nice. And then for documentation, I use Context 7 and Notion. I will show an example of that too. And then within secure testing and security, SEMgrep MCP server for security analysis, and then Playwright to automate browser testing and demo recording. So I'll also show that. And you can check what MCP servers you have with /MCP. So an example of context 7, because that gives you fresh documentation. Because as we know, the models that these LLMs use, they have a cut-off data on the training data. So it's outdated. So it's very nice when you, for instance, need to update dependencies and look for like breaking changes or patch updates and so on. You see here the landing page of Context 7, where you can see that Next.js, they have access to the recently updated 9 hours ago code and documentation. So for instance, here you see an example how I used it to research which browsers I can use for more agentic optimized browsers. So here I ended up using Agent Browser. Yeah. And here you see an example of how I can use Miro and Notion. So for instance, I got this huge decision tree on a project, and it was very hard to actually figure out what was the happy path and map out kind of in code, what does this mean? So then I could actually get Claude to read this and map out everything in text so that I had actually the happy flow and all the decisions. So it's very nice to do research, basically. And this is very easy to share later with non-technical people or a PM. And here you see SEMgrep, the MCP server. So this will then work in collaboration with Claude Code so that the agent edits code and then the output gets scanned by OWASP 10 top vulnerabilities. And then Claude will kind of adjust based on that, the findings. So this is very nice that it just like runs and you get more secure code. And if we move over to skills and plugins, so in 2025, in December, I think, Anthropic had 2 of their employees in AI Engineer, a conference on YouTube channel, and they was very clear, like, don't build agents, build skills instead. And they made this model to kind of explain it so that if you can compare the models as the processors, and there's like little value or more value to kind of take out of the different models. They're getting very good, and like even the small models are catching up with the big models. But then outside of that, again, you have kind of the agents, the operating systems, like for instance, Claude Agent, and they will have kind of like different way to ask you questions, different way, like the client around it. So that would also make some difference, but still like not that much. And then outside of that again is kind of the skills, and you can compare that as all the applications. So if you think about applications today, they are so different, and this is kind of like where we can really both get the value, but also kind of like get the domain expertise and all the differences. So, for instance, to make this presentation, I have made this skill called pixel theme because I have a thing for pixel aesthetics. So then I can just trigger this skill, and basically I can generate every landscape or illustration that I want within that theme. So kind of like suddenly if I want to have like something underwater, it's super easy for me. Uh, and it took some time before I made this skill. So I used a lot of time to kind of like struggle with the ChatGPT picture generation, and I was never happy because it like didn't follow the color theme and it did not look like the same presentation at all. But then with this pixel theme skill, it's super easy. And it takes time. Again, like think of it as the workflow as a product instead. So it took like at least 15 iterations before I was any happy or it actually started to produce good results. And then, so this kind of like is an overview of the skill ecosystem. So you have kind of the skills that come bundled within your agent. For instance, in Claude that I use, you have, for instance, slash batch, which it's very nice if you, for instance, need to migrate from Vue to React. Then you can kind of like batch and do several changes at the same time on different UI components, and then with one instruction. And then debug for debugging, simplify to make code more elegant and simple. And then loop if you need to kind of verify something several times before it stops. Then you have the marketplaces, and here Anthropic is very cautious and says like, don't trust any third-party skills. And I don't do that. I don't copy that much skills from anyone. Just I use the official ones from Claude, and then I use the Anthropic's agent skills that they have provided through a GitHub repo. And then I can kind of like browse and get inspiration from other skills, but I never like download them. I just make them myself because it's so easy. You can just read and then you can make whatever skill you want, basically. So these are different skills that I usually use. So I will go through many of them now. And then, of course, you have the custom ones that you can create your own. Yeah. So this is, for instance, superpowers, which is kind of like a whole flow with 14 different skills. So you have skills within planning, brain implementation, scaling, and quality. So in planning, for instance, I'll show you how brainstorm work, but that basically creates a spec, and it goes through like a brainstorming session that it asks you a question. But what's nice about this is that it illustrates it in a HTML page. And this is very nice because with AI agents, it can generate a lot of information and code, and you can get very tired of reading everything. So then using this skill, then you can visualize it. So it's very nice. And then writing plans to kind of like break down the task into testable steps when you're implementing. And then implementation, then I often use test-driven development and systematic debugging. In scaling, you have, for instance, working with the sub-agent-driven development so that it spins off different agents that get their own context window. And then you using work trees. Yeah. And then in quality, you have this verification before completion, which is very nice because instead of just an agent will often kind of like say, yeah, I'm done in a way because it just wants to finish the session. But then if you trigger this skill, it has to actually verify, okay, like run all the tests, all the linting, type check, and actually verify that you are actually done with the acceptance criteria. And then this, if you are requesting code review, you want to get a review on something you've done, or if you have received some comments on your PR that you want to help brainstorm with an agent, then you can use the receiving code review. So this is very nice. And then here you see, for instance, how brainstorming works in practice. So it will open then this HTML page and you will get asked questions. And sometimes it gives you several options like A and B, and you can click it in there or you can answer and iterate more in the terminal. So this is very nice because then you kind of like visualize and see, oh, okay, no, I don't want this like clickable filtering. I want these buttons because it's not that many filters that I need, and so on. So it's very nice. And then you have the front end design skill because with AI, it tends to kind of like make everything look like AI produced stuff. It's like very sloppy and just one design. But if you use this skill, front end design, it will actually try to understand what are you building and what is the customer need, and like try to actually figure out a design profile that works with what you are building. So for instance, here you see two Claude sessions where I will give the same task but different input, and it generates two completely different processes. So for instance, here, this I would say like brute force, just like build user story one, create topic. And then it goes ahead and it does like a lot of different things and writes stuff. And then it says, okay, I'm done. And then the next one, I say like build user story 1, start with brainstorming for an aesthetic direction, and then front-end design to implement it. So then you will see that it starts to brainstorm. Obviously, it opens like a browser. It shows me kind of like 3 alternatives. So this was for a paramedic learnings platform. So then I was like, okay, let's go for the clinical reference, like a medical publishing tome and what font and so on. And then I said like, okay, now we have the aesthetic. So I would like you to save this into a design theme docs so that I can use this theme again and again across all the app. And then it would go ahead and use that documentation to actually implement the design with the front-end design skill. So then here you see the results. So 2 different processes gives 2 totally different products. So here you see this very, very boring Next.js front page, just like black and white, super boring. And then this one has like this journal feel, and it has like this paper color, a nicer font. This was for like ambulance personnel, so it has like shows like red and white color, so much better. And then we have covered superpowers, which is like a toolkit. But then you also have something called feature dev, which is a 7-phase uh, pipeline in a way. And it will then go through 7 steps. It starts with discovery, where it kind of like captures the ask and makes a to-do list. And then it goes ahead and starts the exploring phase, where it will actually spin off 2 to 3 different agents. And that's very good because when you have many different agents at the same time, if they come back with the same findings, then you are triangulating data. So you can be very sure that it's a good idea or it's a nice bug they found or whatever. And then step 3, this is kind of like the first hard stop where it will not continue without your input. So this is kind of like the clarification phase where it will ask more questions. And then it goes over to architecture. And the good thing here is that it will not just suggest one architecture, it will suggest up to 3 different architectures. So then you can actually evaluate pros and cons of each of them. And then implementation, and then you have given your input. So now it's like, Claude, let loose, you can go, because I have been with you the whole way. And now I know actually my mental model is the same as yours. You can go ahead. And then we are on the review phase. Again, it spins off 3 different agents and looks for simplicity, correctness, and conventions in the repo. And then finally, the wrap-up phase. So it's just nice to know. So I would encourage you to try the different processes, both superpowers, and then compare it. How does it feel using the feature dev? And then find the things that you like. And here, for instance, you might think these are similar. These are 2 skills to do a code review. And my colleague here the other day, he was super surprised because suddenly the bot just commented on the PR without him knowing. But right, this is actually described in the skill that it will do that output, post a comment on the PR. And it will only do so if the scoring is over 80%. So it's quite strict. And there's no customization in here. And I often use this if it's a PR that is already on GitHub that I need to look into. And it will also spin off different agents in the review. So this is like one thing. But this one I use very often when I'm working locally and finishing up a feature. That's like the final step that I do. Then I trigger this and it actually writes a summary in the terminal. And it has a lot of customization. I can check all of these things, but I can also say, okay, I just want you to look into the comments. Like, is there any comments that we need to delete or something like that? And it will also use different agents. And then there's also a documentation skills. And I would say this is very commonly used by business people and product management, but I would argue that this is also very nice for developers. So this skill is also available in the co-work Claude Cowork, the desktop app. So it has many different skills that you can use to read and analyze different document types. Then it has also many things you can do within the design. And you would think that brand guidelines helps you create your own brand guideline for your app, but it's not. It's actually creating a anthropic looking design. But it's nice if you want to kind of like make an animation terminal or something like that. But then you have this theme factory, which actually will help you. It comes with 10 ready-made themes. And this is the front-end design bundled in this plugin too that we just covered. And this is often used for communication, like if you need to post something on Slack and so on. And this is also interesting. I use the web artifacts a lot to kind of get up mocks of design when I develop stuff. And also the skill creator, which I will tell you about later. So just to show you an example with this skill in action. So here in a project, I got this as documentation, and it was an Excel with 56 columns and over 370 rows. And my task was to go in and figure out, okay, row number 16 and 29, and map out every field that had an M for mandatory and CM for conditional mandatory, and then optional. And I had to kind of like make a wizard based on this with the right questions and the options. But if it said code, then it was an N value that I did not find in this documentation. So I had to go into GitHub and the eForm SDK to find it. So this would take like so much time without AI. But then with the doc skills, the doc skill could just analyze and prompt this out to me. And then it doesn't stop there, because this is also the good thing with AI. It's so easy to visualize and produce things. So I could actually go ahead and make a prototype that I could give to deploy and give to my PM so that he could click around and play and learn kind of like, okay, eForm 16, what are mandatory fields? And then if it said code, then he could actually go in and he could open and see what the options would be and then decide, okay, this should go into the sketch and not in a way. And also it could suggest like, okay, how should we group the different information in it? So it's like super nice for research and to kind of nail a better product, I would say. So, and then there's another skill called security review, which you can trigger explicitly, and it will do security analysis. And you can also set this up to run in your CI if you want. But here you see just an example of how it can run. So now I'm actually scanning many files. You see 12 files, and it actually tells me kind of like, okay, findings, high severity, medium, low, and then give me some ideas of things that I can improve. And you can also let Claude find your automation, like things you can improve. So with this skill, the Claude automation recommender, it will actually then suggest like which hooks I should set up. So for instance, here I did this after it suggested it, but it said like you can set up a pre-tool use word blocks that Claude can go in and change things in the .env file. And it can suggest skills, what subagents I can set up, MCP servers that I can connect, and also quick wins. For instance, if I need some housekeeping on my permissions, it can actually scan all my conversations and see, okay, but you usually accept this all the time, so why not just like make a rule for it? And then we have all the custom skills that you can create. And here it's your imagination that is the limit, really. So here you see an example of different skills that I've set up. So I've made, for instance, a test implementation skill. So this will have access to some test users. It will have an overview of my app and the routes that it has. So then I can just paste a linear issue or a GitHub PR, and then it will actually go ahead and test that the acceptance criteria are met. And I can combine this with a demo recorder. So it will record a GIF or a video and then actually post a Slack message that describes what I just implemented. And then a pedagogical PR review, I will show you in a second. This one I will also show you in a second. This one I have talked about. Yeah, and this one, for instance, I made a skill to kind of make it easier to do dependency updates so that it will actually go ahead and call the Context 7 MCP server to fetch the updated documentation. So, and I said that you can create your own skills, but it's important to create them correctly so that they work. So you can actually use then Skill Creator if you want to create a skill, and that will help you kind of like get the right structure of it, the right variables, and kind of suggest what the description trigger should be. But then you can also check it with the writing skills, and it will then kind of like test it and give you feedback if you should improve anything. So it's like kind of like a quality check of your skill. So just to show you some example of the skills that I created. So this one was when I worked with a CRM system, and I was getting annoyed that the AI was suggesting design and UI components that did not follow our design theme. So then I said, like, first step, redesign the theme. And then second step, I wanted to get inspiration from different sources. So I wanted to use 21st Dev, and this is an open community platform where both developers and designers can share their design components and then search in parallel. And because 21st Dev is an open platform, whoever can add things there, it's not that secure, right? So then step 3 was read the output from this MCP server and check that it is secure. So it would then go ahead and scan it for React top 10 vulnerabilities. And then step 4, it would synthesize 1 to 4 alternatives. And this was a project where I didn't have a designer, right? So I had to kind of be the designer myself. And then it would save it to a research document. So here you see how I can browse, and I like this rainbow thingy. And this is actually after a conversation, it triggers up and shows me an empty state component, and I can see the different ones. I like this one, and then I could like chat a little bit and say, okay, I want this and that changed, and then I could go ahead and copy the code or just look into it, or yeah. And this is the pedagogical PR review skill. And with agentic AI, it can sometimes produce very big PRs. And I was getting a little bit overwhelmed about that because it's very like hard if you're reviewing someone else's PR and you don't have the same mental model. So then I created this skill that it would, and this was also a project where I was quite new to the code base. So then having this skill, it would actually educate me at the same time. For every PR, I learned more and more. So here you see how I trigger it with a GitHub number. And as you see here, this is huge. It had 90 files. It deleted 41,000 lines of code. So this was actually a good day at work, but it was delivering 4 different tickets. So it would start off and give me kind of like an overview, orientation of, okay, what is this about? And sometimes it draws up like ASCII diagrams for me to understand. And then it suggests, okay, I suggest that we go through this in 13 steps and group it like this. And then it would go ahead and start like going through. Sometimes it's like per file. Sometimes if it's very big, it's like per domain or part. So then it goes and explains me a lot in the code, things that has been done, and it catches improvements on the way and adds it to a to-do list on the bottom. And then after some time, after all the 13 steps, you see that I usually dig into each of the findings and be like, okay, now let's verify, are these findings actually good findings, and should we leave a comment in the PR or not? Yeah. And this is another skill that I created because I'm not a security engineer, right? But it's so cool that we now can actually do things that previously we had to kind of like rent someone in to have a penetration test. And I'm not saying it should kind of like, how do you say it, erstatte? Thank you. But just like it's nice that you can do a small penetration test from home in a container, and like you can find some vulnerabilities by yourself. So this was also like this one man project that I was working on. So then I used something called Kali, which has an MCP server that gives you 11 different tools here. So you see from like a port scanner to see if any of the ports are exposed, web vulnerability scanner, uh, directory brute force, SQL injection tester, WordPress scanner. And I was like, why do we need this? But then it used this to kind of generate words so that it could try different URLs like /admin and see, okay, can I get in there? Is it secure? And then you see it has some funny names like Hydra Attack and John Crack, password cracker. So this is very nice. So then I am on my machine. I have like a Docker desktop, and then this I let it loose, and it tries to hack the system that I built and gives me feedback on vulnerabilities that I should handle. So this is very nice. But the first time I did this, and I asked Claude, like, okay, I want to try to use Kali. It actually went ahead and found uh, the MCP server from a random guy on GitHub first and not the official Kali. So be aware, always be aware that, yeah, it can do stuff. So you need to follow along. Okay, so now over to the workflow. So here you see the workflow that I use and different things that I do. So the first phase is about kind of like understanding and research, both design, but also architecture. So here I use brainstorming, design first collaboration that I will show soon, UI inspo that we covered with 21st Dev, and also Claude Desktop and Cowork. And this I use to, for instance, mock design or make specification. So I'll show you this later. And this is like usually design and PM work, right? So and then in plan, I scope issues. I use writing plans and plan mode, code. Then it's sub agent driven, work crease, and so on. Verify. Yeah, I'll cover this too. So if we look into a real example, so this is from the CRM system that I was building. I got in this issue suggesting that can we add a period filter to the leads board, right? And here you see that the user has attached a screenshot of where it should be. And as we know, never listen to solution suggestions from users. First, understand the problem and the need. Because here you see that they suggest like, let's put the filter here, right? So let's see what the process teaches us. So then the first thing I did, and this was my ever first time using Cowork. I haven't used it a lot, but I was very surprised because what's cool is that you can trigger the plugins. And here you see that I get a lot of domain expertise. So I can like go into legal and kind of like get help or legal competence, finance, data scientist, engineering, and product management. So then I was curious, okay, let's check out this like write spec thingy. So now I am putting on the product management hat and exploring product requirements. So here you see how I then trigger the skill, writing plans, give it some context, the GitHub issue, and you see that it has access to the code base. And you see, I triggered the skill. It starts by making a to-do list with the different tasks. You see that it connects to GitHub. And then it starts kind of like planning. And after some time, it has created a product requirements doc where it describes the problem, the goals, the non-goals, user stories, how it should split up, edge cases, the requirements, prioritized acceptance criteria. So this is super nice, right? And of course, I chose a very easy or small example just to show you kind of the process. This is maybe overkill for a filter, but anyways, it's just to show you. So here you see how I then scope it. I have moved from Explore into Planning, and I scope it in GitHub. And here again, I'm using the GitHub MCP server. You see that it has actually created a comment with the different issues in the issue. And then you can see it reference the spec. It gives me like acceptance criteria, tasks. So this is very nice because when I let loose the agents, they need to have all the context, right? So then everything is attached to the GitHub issue, and that it has made several issues subtasks. So after that, we now have the why and the what, but we still don't have the how. Like, how should it look? How should the design be? And also, how should the architecture be? The technical decisions. So then here you see how I use Cowork again to actually make a mock-up, and it has access to the code base. So now it has made a replica of the release board, and it says, okay, so in our company, we use OKRs and we use half-year measures, and it just makes sense to filter the ferdig lane. So it suggested to put the filter inside the ferdig lane, and it has then, now I can like take a screenshot and attach that to the GitHub issue. So again, when I let loose the agents, they have the screenshots, they have everything in the issue. Yeah. So now we have the design and then the architecture. So again, with these AI agents, sometimes it's like so important to have a combined mental model with the AI. So then this process, I made this skill based on a blog post article from Rahul Garg, and it's called Design First Collaboration. And basically, it's simulating like a structured conversation pattern that mirrors a whiteboard exercise. So you can think that you're like drawing with the agent. And what's nice is that it takes you through one level by level, and you can stop it on the way, and you get kind of the same mental model as the AI. So it starts with capabilities. So what does this feature do? And then components, what pieces do we need? And then interactions, how do all of these pieces communicate? And then finally, contracts, like what are the interfaces, the data schema, and so on. So this is kind of the cheapest moment to find errors and find misalignments, because you are in the planning phase and it's taking you through like an overview and not like these huge PRs with 8,000 lines of code. Then it's very expensive to find misalignment. So here you see the skill in action. So now it has stopped, hard stop on level 1 capabilities. And I can say like, okay, good, I agree. And then it goes over to level 2 components, and it has a review gate. So then I can actually catch errors on the way. And then it continues like this with level 3 and 4. And it ends with making an ADR, architectural decision record. And that's my first commit, just this one pager. So it's super easy. It's much easier for my colleagues to read one page with the architectural decision, where I actually say, okay, so I evaluated this approach and this approach, but I went for this one. And then they can give feedback if I have any misalignments of the system or anything. They can help me catch it now. And then now I can let loose of the agents because they have all the context. So here you see they have the issues tickets. It suggests how they should split up the work. So it says like, okay, we will have an agent, backend agent. It provided me a to-do list here. Here it spins off the first agent with the backend task. This is issue number 89 and 90. And then the front end agent. And no, sorry, not the front end agent, but I always interact with the team lead. Now it spins up the front end agent. So they will kind of work in parallel. And it goes on like this. And then the testing agents get the tasks. Now we with the test, and it will run until all the tests are green. And this is possible because they got all of this context, the design, the architecture, and everything. So now it's just about like letting them loose. And when I tried this was a beta feature. So you can check it out with the agent teams. I think they call it orchestrating a team of agents. But I don't think it's a beta feature anymore. So, but don't expect it to be perfect on the first try. You have to iterate it with it. So I usually find many bugs and things that I want to improve. Also, maybe decisions that I took that I don't longer agree with when I see it live. So here, for instance, you see how it added the filter here, and I thought it was very like cramped. So I didn't actually like it when I saw it here. So then you see after some iteration, we moved it down here and gave the stats a little bit more space. And here you see how I'm now using the test implementation. So it loads the skill, it has gotten the GitHub issue with acceptance criteria, and it verifies the criteria one by one. And here you see now it's not me clicking, it's Claude with Chrome that like clicks and tests all the acceptance criteria. And after some time, it will then go ahead and update the GitHub with the findings from the test run. And then post it to the parent issue so that I have the summary there of things. And now over to verify. So I think this is the most phase with the most potential. And it took some time for me to actually understand it. I was like doing all of this verification on my own. But Anthropic's official best practice tip number 1 is actually like without verification, Claude may produce plausible looking code that doesn't actually work. So to get a good workflow in the verification phase is also very important. So here you see different things that I do in the verification phase, and I combine different things. So the first thing that I do is to have a writer and then a reviewer. So not using the same agent session to write the code and then review it. And here I use the PR review toolkit a lot that I mentioned. And then I also use the verification before completion that we have talked about, just like proof before claim of success. And then it will run like the test and lints and everything. And then this one is something I recently started with, but actually having an external judge judge the work of Claude. So for UI work, I use Gemini, the Flash model, and that is very good for UI feedback. I will show an example of that later. And then to kind of like look in the browser, just the visual verification. And here I use both the Chrome, Agentic browser, Playwright, and also Cosmos and Storybook. So that's a UI component documentation library that I can show you. So here you see an example using Gemini Judge. So I access this model through Open Router with just one API key. Then you can access many different models. So it will then go ahead to send then this, I use this to review every slide in this presentation. So then it will send a PNG file through the API, and then I will get some score and suggestion for improvement. So here you see that I'm saying like review slide number 49, and it will review it by 8 different categories and give them score. So here you see that, okay, the visual polish didn't get a good score. So it will then actually suggest something that I can improve. And it will then ask like, should I trigger pixel theme brainstorming to generate a new illustration with Nano Banana? So this is also reachable through the Open Router API. And I did this on my own first. And I was like writing a lot of text, and I was like, oh, this takes so much time. Like an AI can do this review so much better than me. So then after getting the agent to review it, it got so much faster. And of course, there's many things often I pick that the agent doesn't, but it's just about getting some help along the way to automate things. And here you see the how I can get a fast visual overview of all the component variants. So this is also very good if you're new to a code base. The first thing I did, for instance, with the CRM system, was actually just to get up all the components that was used so that I can click through each of them and see the variants. And then when I'm making something new, I can actually pick and choose from things we have. And I would say that this forces you to have better um, component design because they need to live isolated outside of the app in Cosmos. So Cosmos is just for React components, but I think Storybook is more versatile. And yeah, so this is another thing that I did actually the last 2 weeks because we were on a very short deadline and we had to produce so much. So I was like, okay, I need to work faster. So then I actually made an autonomous flow skill because I was very like in the explore plan phase, I'm very tight in everything, making decisions. In the code phase, I let go. And in the verify phase, I usually did things very manually. But then I was like, okay, but if I first automate it and then I can jump in, I will catch, I don't need to catch that much, right? Because it has already done a verification flow. So here, now step number 1, it will actually self-verify with the skill verify before completion. Then it does a code review with the 6 different agents, gives a summary, and actually goes ahead and fixes things that it finds. Then it does a browser test without me watching and actually make sure that acceptance criteria are met. And then, because all the way in the Explorer plan, it has had many agents that are running, and it will make many small commits. So you have like 30 commits, and it's very tough to go through and review when it's so splitted. So then I made a skill called commit dance, where it will actually go ahead and make a temp file with all the commits and all the history. And then it will go ahead and suggest a more pedagogical cluster of commits so that it's easy for a human to review. So it will go ahead and then make a clean narrative. And then it will create a PR, push it with a new clean narrative. And then in GitHub, we then have an automated code review. So then the bot will actually do a review and leave some comments. And then it will actually go ahead and read the bot reviews and then fix them and actually answer the bot. And then I jump in after that, because then it has kind of like catched a lot of things before me jumping in. And this is still a PR. So it's not accepted at all. It's still in a work in progress phase. It's just that I've had a lot tighter process to increase the quality of the code. And here you see how I get like up to speed, because this is actually to make this presentation. I use Conductor, which is a way to have different Claude agents running in parallel. So here you see that I can like navigate between the chats. I give this one, I started like create a PR, and then this one, it has actually created a PR. I usually watch them. I'm just showing you that you can very easily like merge them. I gave the first chat a task, and here you see that I have like 136 different done PRs that I have already merged. And this is like for each slide. So I can be like, okay, quality check, the slide information is something outdated, translate it to English, like so many small things that agents can run in parallel to get me up to speed. And what's nice with Conductor is that I can, like you saw that I can see the file overview, I can see the changed files. I can also run up a version of the app in this chat so that I can test just that. So it's very nice. And there's also Warp, which is a modern terminal. So with one click, I have kind of the full environment. So here it opens up like the backlog, a Claude session that has the access to the BFF logs on disk, or a tunnel, which is our identity provider, the web app, so I can test, and then Cosmos here, so that I can go through the different components. So this is very nice with tab configuration, that you can just like get the app done. And I can also have work trees where I then have for different features that I'm developing. So here you see that it opens like the same, the back end and the front end and Cosmos. And then I actually get my own URL. So I don't need to kind of remember all the ports where I'm testing what, because I see, okay, feature 1 is on this URL, so I can test that. And I do this with Portless. So I warmly recommend Portless. It's very nice. It's from Vercel. And then what's nice is that here you see now that I have 4 different tab groups going on. So maybe in the first one, this is checked out in dev. And this one I usually leave open. So I use it to review PRs from others, but I also do it for bug checking or checking something that is off on my setup and so on. And then in the pink one here, you see I'm working with the feature 1, for instance, and this one is in brainstorming and it needs my high attention because it's many decisions. So I'm usually like accepting many choices and watching the HTML pages coming up. And then in the next tab, feature 2, for instance, maybe that's come to the ADR phase. So I'm actually waiting for review from colleagues on GitHub. So I can't do much there. And then on the last one, maybe that has come to the sub-agent implementation phase. And here I have been very close to it in the explore and planning. So now it's just like little oversight. It just needs to get done. And this can run like sometimes for half a day and sometimes for like a whole day without me watching. And then I jump in afterwards. So we are at the end. So 5 takeaways. The first one, AI is just a tool, nothing more. And what makes it magical is your brain combined with it. And I like to compare it like, just imagine you have a lerret and paint and a pencil. Some makes a strektegning, but others make Picasso. So it's like you need to practice. It's an art, it's engineering, but you need to practice. And it's your brain with it that makes it magical, not the AI tool. And then the workflow is the product. Every finished task that you get is just a test that your workflow works. And you own all the generated code. Don't like blame the AI later. It's like your responsibility, your process. And the key skill to the future, I think, is adaptive capability, being polymorph, the ability to learn and change contexts. And finally, without verification, Claude produces plausible looking code that doesn't actually work. So with that, I would like to thank you. And I would love feedback. That's the only way I improve. So if you want, you can leave them by scanning this QR code. And also, let's connect. This is a QR code to my LinkedIn. And if this was just a taster, but Kodemaker actually now has 2-day courses. So if you are interested in the full course, you can scan this QR code. And during this week, we have a discount code called NDC AI, if you want that. Thank you so much.